Is Morgan Wallen going to jail? Is UConn now a blue bud? Is it okay to wear blackface as suggested by famous actor Billy Dee Williams? Is it racist, as said by Charlamagne the God, to criticize DEI? Is Caitlin Clark to be torn down by Sue Bird and the stars of the WNBA? And should men infiltrate women's sports, as suggested by the head coach of the national champion South Carolina women's basketball team, Dawn Staley? 1, 2, and 3. You don't want to miss it all with the host of the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, always on demand at Apple or on Spotify by just hitting subscribe. Or if you prefer to watch the Will Cain Show, just hit subscribe on YouTube. The link is right under this live stream. And you can catch not only exclusive interviews like that with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Stephen A. Smith, Dave Portnoy, Tony Robbins, or Jordan Peterson, but you can also watch the Will Cain Show in YouTube Shorts. You can watch it in its entirety in past episodes. You can watch versions of Off the Rails with Will and Pete. Just hit subscribe on YouTube to the Will Cain Show. Success. Lived up to the hype. My personal Rotten Tomatoes review on the total solar eclipse, a hit. I live in Dallas, Texas, right in the zone of totality. And let me tell you something, it lived up to expectations. Maybe that's not cool, but it's true. My wife and I stood outside, as did Violet, the fawn Doberman, and we waited. Now, if you were in a part of the country that got partiality, if you got 70%, 80%, I would understand today if you say bust. But if you lived in the zone of totality, I'd be surprised if you say it was a non-event. The light got weird. You put on your glasses. You watch the moon cover the sun. And then in the moment of totality, it's pitch black. It's total darkness. And the coolest part is that you could remove your glasses and look directly up at the sun, and it looked like an image out of Lord of the Rings. It looked not like a donut, but like an emanating ring, the ring that everyone is searching for, that Gollum has a hold of. It's just a ring, a thin ring of light up in the sky. It is truly otherworldly. Now, I saw commentators saying it puts you into some humility and context at our place in this greater universe. I have to admit, I had no such deep thoughts. Mine were simply, wow, Violet thinks it's a non-event, and isn't this cool? And then when the sun reemerged, to me, the weirdest and coolest part happened. And I don't know if anybody else in totality experienced this, and I don't know if I was blinded by staring at the sun and my other senses simply enhanced, but the backyard was full of beautiful smells. It's like the flowers responded to this weird celestial event and pollinated. It smelled wonderful, like flowers. And by the way, you know me, Green Thumb Will Cain. I loved it. I thought it was awesome. And I thought it was just one of those things that happens every, 2 decades that you can experience. I didn't think it was the result, along with the recent earthquake in the Northeast, along with the hatching of yet another cicada brood. I didn't think that it was the result of climate change. But that's because I'm uninformed and don't watch The View. I give you Sunny Hostin.
All those things together would maybe lead one to believe that, either climate change exists,
that's more
or something is returning.
Earthquakes are not at the mercy of climate change. It's underground.
No, it happens. And the eclipse, they've known about the eclipse coming because eclipses happen.
Now, you're in a bad spot. You're in a tight spot, Tommy. If your voice of reason is Joy Behar, if you're getting fact-checked by Joy and Whoopi, you've lost the plot. The weird thing about this is Sunny Hostin is probably the smartest person at that table. And with some experience and personal relationship in my past of knowing Sunny, was also the nicest person, one of the nicest people that I've experienced behind the scenes in media. So how does somebody nice and smart end up saying things that are so incredibly dumb? And saying these dumb things, and this perhaps I think is the greatest sin, with a purity of condescension. She had nothing for those fact corrections. She had nothing for the fact that earthquakes have no relationship to climate change. It wasn't penetrating her talking point. Just like recently when she was confronted with facts on race with Coleman Hughes, the author of a new book who appeared on The View, her response is overwhelming condescension. It is the kind of condescension that comes from someone who believes not that they are right, but that they are popular. See, I think Sunny Nice and Smart has been captured by what she believes to be popular in the channel of the river, the mainstream current. But what she doesn't realize is that the current has flooded and is running out of control. This is the conversation we had yesterday regarding what I think is a big moment for a big star like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to reject the poisoned channel of the river that is the mainstream. With Sunny Hostin, you see someone still floating into toxicity. She thinks that what she is saying is not right, but she thinks that what she is saying is something that has an audience. She thinks that what she is saying is popular. She thinks that what she is saying is mainstream, even as the channel of toxicity pushes you into insanity. And I could sit here today and say, we need better voices. We need more independence. We need more backbone. We need more thoughtfulness in mainstream media, but we don't, because I think we've arrived at the point of exposure. We're not simply Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but normal people standing on the banks of the river go, I don't like where this thing is headed. In fact, let's dive into that as we explore how women, quote unquote, support women. Story number one. The men's national basketball championship was last night, the NCAA championship between UConn and Purdue. And UConn is once again your national champion, the first back-to-back national champion since 2007. It is probably a safe bet that UConn has arrived into the club of blue bloods. In fact, let's break that down just a little bit later on the Will Cain Show. Where's the line? Where's the cusp? Who's in the club? Who's out when it comes to blue bloods? But UConn is your national champion. It'll be fascinating to see where the ratings come in for the men's championship, because it's almost certain to come in less than the women's national championship game, which took place on Sunday. On Sunday, Iowa lost to South Carolina in a game that got something like 18.7 million viewers. It's the highest rated basketball game, NBA or NCAA, men or women, in 4 years. And it's driven by the Caitlin Clark effect. Caitlin Clark, the star of the Iowa Hawkeyes, is incredible. I struggled with the appropriate adjective and landed on something that is underwhelming. She's more than incredible. She's a phenom. She is a generational talent. She is original. She is unique. She commands eyeballs in the same way Tiger Woods. Caitlin Clark has demanded this year with her play that people pay attention to women's basketball, but she has been met this past weekend as she attempted to climb the final peak of the mountain with a weird antipathy from women. Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, Lynette Woodard, the greats of women's basketball, seemingly rejected Caitlin Clark. Lynette Woodard, who had the previous record for most scored by a women's collegiate basketball player, said she still holds the record. She rejected Caitlin Clark. Since that time, by the way, Lynette Woodard, realizing that she's floating down the toxicity of the channel of the river, looked over to the bank and said, I better climb out. She apologized and said that Caitlin Clark is the great, that she is the record holder. But in the moment, Lynette was saying something that was being echoed. She was reflecting a temperament among WNBA stars and women's basketball players of rejection of Caitlin Clark. Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird have talked about taking someone else if you were starting a franchise in college basketball. A Lady Husky from UConn over Caitlin Clark, which is insane. It's insane. It's insane business-wise, capitalism-wise, ticket sales-wise, TV ratings-wise, but it's also insane basketball-wise. And it makes you wonder why. What's going on? Why this rejection of Caitlin Clark? And I'll give you two potential reasons. One, jealousy. Just pure, common, not very notable because a fundamental condition of humanity, pure jealousy. It's an odd thing to hear that kind of jealousy from an industry that has constantly complained they don't get the same treatment as men. Talk about that they have to fly commercial. Talk about the fact that they have to fly Spirit Airlines while the men fly private and make big checks, and the women have to live the life of relative paupers. If you don't want to fly Spirit, embrace Caitlin Clark. If you want people to watch women's basketball, embrace Caitlin Clark. But the second potential reason is uglier. It is tribalism. It's twofold. Caitlin Clark's not part of the LGBTQ community. And that's a very big community in the WNBA. She's not part of the club. She's also not part of the club in that she is white, and that race is part of the rejection and criticism of Caitlin Clark. I think that it is undeniable that we have seen that when it comes to criticism from Cheryl Swoops or anyone else among the many who have failed to acknowledge the greatness of Caitlin Clark. Because Caitlin Clark is white, she has not been embraced by so many black commentators and former players. Now, you could point out, well, Taurasi and Sue Bird are white. But there is an overwhelming pull, a desire to, again, get into what they perceive to be the channel of mainstream, to be popular. And anti-whiteness makes you cool even if you are white. Caitlin Clark's race, I think, is a very plausible reason why, inexplicably, seemingly, she has received criticism and rejection from fellow basketball players, former and current players of the WNBA. And I think it's another example that shows the canard, the ridiculousness of girl power. Women supporting women. Here you have women tearing down women. And that's not the only example. Outkick's Dan Zakshiki. Dan Z used to work on the Will Cain Show on ESPN, now works for Outkick. And he went to the press conference before the national championship game, and he asked South Carolina head coach Dawn Staley how she felt about transgender athletes, men pretending to be women playing in collegiate sports. Here's was the answer.
One of the major issues facing women's sports right now is the debate, discussion topic about the inclusion of transgender athletes, biological males, in women's sports. I was wondering if you would tell me your position on that issue.
Damn, you got deep on me, didn't you? I'm under the opinion of if you're a woman, you should play. If you consider yourself a woman and you want to play sports or vice versa, you should be able to play.
She did not want to be answering that question. You could tell with the pause, the false starts. She did not want to be answering that question. And why? She couldn't figure out the middle of the river. She couldn't figure out the mainstream. She couldn't figure out the popular answer. And she landed on insanity. She landed on the destruction of women's sports. You know, when I first saw this, I know Dan, I like Dan. I thought, if I were Dawn Staley in that moment, I'm leading up to a national championship game, I probably would have answered the question like the Iowa head coach did. Dan asked the same question of the Iowa Hawkeyes coach. And she said, I'm not focused on that right now. I'm focused on preparing for a national championship game. She went on to say it's an important topic and we should address it at a later date. But now I'm focused on winning the national championship. And I think that would have been a perfectly acceptable answer. But the answer by Staley in that moment is not, because it is the end. It is the destruction of women's sports. It was applauded by Sue Bird. And it's weird to see, star of the WNBA, Sue Bird applaud the destruction of women's sports. Because make no mistake, an average men's player dominates the women's game. Dominates. No, I think it's so fascinating that people jumped all over this. Clay Travis was attacked for asking the simple question, should men be allowed to play women's sports? And the entirety of the sports media complex, I don't know, the Jeff Pearlmans of the world, he's an author, others, saying, that Clay is, a bigot or he's divisive. But what is divisive in asking that simple question that people refuse to answer? What's divisive is destroying women's sports. But this is the quality. I guess they think that now is the quality of the mainstream. That you will say, no, if you want to be enlightened, if you don't want to be a bigot, men should be able to invade women's sports. And by the way, it's only been 33 women in NCAA. 33 men who've invaded women's sports. You know what? That's too many. That's 33 too many. And it's a matter of time before an Northeast Directional School or Southeast Oklahoma State fields enough men on a team to dominate the women's sports, and then we'll see the real opinion of Dawn Staley. But this, again, is the quality of what you get from those that are celebrated as smart and those that are celebrated as popular and those that are pushed forward as the mainstream. You get Sonny Hostin, you get Dawn Staley, you get Sue Bird, you get Jamel Hill. Jamel Hill recently criticizing Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson's statement to us here on the Will Cain Show that he wouldn't endorse Joe Biden. And then today, focused in on a segment on Jesse Waters, where Jets owner Woody Johnson took a political stance. Here, watch.
And I think the world will be a safer and better place. There'll be less crime. He's extremely compassionate. People don't know that. He's extremely funny. I think people are starting to appreciate his sense of humor. Mm-hmm. And he just impressed all of us once again. And I think, the overwhelming thought was, this is just the beginning for us. Everybody in that room was ready to step up hard.
That's Jets owner Woody Johnson endorsing Donald Trump. And the response from Hill is, but players aren't supposed to talk about politics. It's low quality to the point of dishonesty. So first of all, people aren't the same. And you understand the difference between an employer and employee. Every single one of you watching, every single one of us talking understands the difference between an employer and an employee. No NFL owner has said that an NFL player cannot make a political endorsement. No one has said that. They've never said you can't have a political opinion. What they said is you can't do it on the field. What they've said is you can't do it on the job. What they said is you can't do it in the NFL. And there's no amount of hypocrisy here that you could point out that makes anyone believe they can't tell the difference between an employee and an employer. And by the way, the people that push forward that equality and hypocrisy, childish observations at all time, are the goal in every single situation, don't live that way. Trust me when I tell you that way. They see themselves as stars. They put themselves above others. They say things that others can't say, and no one actually believes it. It's simply childish, and it's simply saying something that you think, again, is swimming down the middle of the river, and the middle of the river is polluted. It's not popular. It's definitely not smart, and it's increasingly, this is the hopeful point, it's increasingly less mainstream. Let's break it all down. Plus, is it racist to criticize DEI with the host of the Rubin Report, Dave Rubin, next on The Will Cain Show.
I'm Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and co-anchor of America's Newsroom. Join me for my brand new podcast, Perino on Politics. Listeners of Everything Will Be Okay will gravitate toward this podcast too. Every Monday, I'm going to talk to people I trust in politics as they tell me what they're seeing and thinking in the 2024 election cycle. As they prep me to cover the upcoming election, they'll prep you, the voters, too. Make sure you subscribe to this series on FoxNewsPodcast.com or wherever you download podcasts and leave a rating and review.
Exclusively on Fox Nation. It's time.
The evidence that's come out is very compelling.
For justice.
The only thing worse than being accused of a crime is knowing you're guilty.
For vengeance.
They were as unlikable a pair of defendants as you'll ever see.
None of you guys are 21, right?
For
I am not drinking a little.
Really bad decisions.
I'm drinking a lot.
It's time for crime. Only on Fox Nation. All part of Fox Justice. Sign up now and get your first year of Fox Nation for $29.99. America is streaming.
from the Fox News Podcast Network.
I'm Emily Campagno, and this is the Fox True Crime Podcast.
And I had nothing to do with her disappearance, but people still accuse me of it.
I sit down with the people who lived the nightmares.
I was in shock. I was just devastated.
The investigators who tirelessly worked on the case.
I feel for their families, and I really hope that they can catch this guy.
Bringing you closer to the story than you ever thought possible.
Listen and follow now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
We're just asking questions. Anti-Semitism and censorship. And is Dave Rubin racist? As said by Charlamagne the God for criticizing DEI. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com on the Fox News YouTube channel. And always on demand. Just subscribe Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. He is the host of the Rubin Report. He's also the creator of locals.com. And he's on X at Rubin Report. And he's joining us now on the Will Cain Show. It's Dave Rubin. What's up, Dave?
Will, can we have your guys on the fly just put racist under my name? Would that be possible? Do they have that kind of technology over there? I don't know what's going on.
I think they have a keyboard as they run the show. I'm going to save you and me them calling that audible. But so the point is, Charlamagne the God, host of The Breakfast Club, a very influential morning show in New York City and a contributor to The Daily Show, did a thing on DEI last week. He was notable, Dave, in that he was criticizing DEI as not accomplishing the stated goals of DEI. But in it, he used you, he used Jesse Waters, he used a few other people as examples of how the right is criticizing DEI, but sort of under the hood, what you find lurking is racism.
Yeah, well, first off, I refuse to call anyone the God. So his name's Leonard. So Lenny over there at The Daily Show, which is apparently, I guess, apparently it is a daily show or it isn't. It's a little unclear to me. Jon Stewart hosts it, I guess, once a week, but then I guess they have a bunch of other people that do it the other days. He was hosting. And you're right. It's interesting about this Lenny guy because he kind of gets it about DEI because he opened the segment by basically saying it doesn't work and it has not gotten the fruits that they would have liked, which apparently means that you should just have black and lesbian and trans executives in all of these companies and all of that. And then at the same time, he also said that here's a bunch of people. He showed a clip of me and Jesse, as you pointed out, a couple other Fox hosts, basically criticizing DEI. And he said, oh, what they're really doing is just masquerading for their racism. Now, call me old school, Will. I am of a certain age. I think we're ballparking in the age range here. But I come from a time when not caring about skin color made you not racist, and being obsessed with skin color made you racist. There was a guy, I always forget his name. He was big in the 60s, Martin something or other, and he would give speeches about how he didn't want his children to be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That is actually the reverse of where Lenny and some of these people have ended up. So yeah, it's a complete farce. And by the way, I should tell you, Will, I'm pretty sure that our producers are coordinating behind our back because your whole intro there is exactly what I did on my show today. So you keep that right? Guy. That's what I'm saying. You're doing fine work.
I got to get more original. You've already done that an hour or two before me. I got to get more original. We're sharing a brain. People do say we look alike as well. So now this is a real problem.
Brothers.
I've never been called a knockoff Dave Rubin. I've been called a knockoff Clay Travis, a wannabe Colin Cowherd, a wannabe Skip Bayless, and a Costco brand Tucker Carlson. But even though I probably have the most physical resemblance to you, I have not yet been called a knockoff Dave Rubin.
That's funny. Costco Tucker Carlson. Like you could get a couple Will Cains in a bag. You know what I mean?
Right.
You get the
Kirkland
primo Tucker
brand.
Carlson, but Will Cain comes in a 3-pack of shirts, you know?
That's right. Or Kirkland brand Tucker Carlson.
Kirkland.
Will Cain.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, so listen, man. You're doing a lot of good stuff, and you're in the middle of some very controversial stuff on the right. And, you know, this is one of those things. I think we're in a weird place where there is a divide on the right, but there's also a divide between what online right is, Dave, and sort of like, you know, what's really happening out there in the real world and what people are talking about. And I think it's hard for people, I really do, who do what you and I do, to understand that not everything happening on X is what's happening into the minds of your average normal American. To that note, I want to address a couple of things you've been involved in. So Ben Shapiro did a monologue. He didn't name names, but he was definitely criticizing the right for indulging in a style of rhetoric and discourse of we're just asking questions. And you kind of gave it a thumbs up or a cosign. What are you saying? Like, what do you think is the risk here of the style of thought of we're just asking questions?
Sure. Well, first off, I just want to say, Will, to your credit, that you introed that beautifully, because I think there are way bigger problems than what sits between, say, Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson. Most Americans are not worried about that. There are ideological differences between those guys on foreign policy and a bunch of other stuff, but that's not really what the problems of America are. And one of the things that I've tried really hard to do, particularly in the last couple of weeks, and maybe I've failed at it at times, is that I really want to heal this stuff, because with everything that you laid out in your intro there about the woke and the gender confusion and now the neo-racism and what the Biden administration is doing to our borders and foreign policy and everything else, that is the stuff that we all should be worried about. The little stuff as it pertains, it's not even little, let's say, but as it pertains to knick-knack fights between these guys is just so irrelevant for the average person. So look, I would put it this way, without throwing anyone under the bus specifically. I would say that when a society is sick, there is a long history of that society turning on the Jews. Where Jews flourish in societies, societies do well, because that means that minorities, and Jews are usually sort of the token minority in civilizations, if Jews are doing okay, then the society is doing okay, because there's a certain amount of tolerance and openness and acceptance of the other. When things start getting wacky for Jews, usually those societies don't last much longer. So the thing that now we've seen what identity politics on the left has done to the Democrat Party and how it's destroyed so much of the basic fabric of American society. Now there are little embers of it on the right, and I would prefer to take those, to quash those, to put some water on those. So for example, I will use names in this one because you mentioned Ben and Tucker. It's like Ben has repeatedly laid out what his positions are as it pertains to Israel and foreign policy, and Tucker has laid out his positions. The difference is that Tucker has basically said that he despises Ben Shapiro. I think his word was despises, because he wants his children, in effect, to die for Israel. Ben has never once, he repeated it on my show in this studio last week, called for American troops in Israel. I was just in Israel for a week. I didn't hear one person across the political spectrum call for American troops. What they want there is they'd like a little diplomatic cover because they're getting hit every which way. And yeah, they do need munitions to fight this war with an army. I mean, Hamas is not just a terrorist group. They are a full-on army that has been armed to the teeth for a long time. But nobody wants American troops there. It will end up like the American Marines in Lebanon in the 80s. It will just not end well. So I would like some of that sort of miscommunication to be cleared up. Ben has repeatedly said he's willing to discuss this with Tucker. If I can help facilitate that, I will. They don't need me for that, but I certainly would try to help if I could.
Well, so here's the thing. So I know that people listening, and I know that people in general, they like to talk about personality conflicts. It's entertaining. Yeah. And that's not why I'm bringing this up. I'm not interested in Ben versus Tucker. I'm not interested in Ben versus Candace. What I'm interested in is only it insofar as it reflects perhaps a real divide in America, not just on X, okay? And to your point, I think you make a very good point historically. You're historically correct about the way societies for millennia have responded to Jews. I think that I believe in the balancing act, Dave, and it's not because I think the wishy-washy, the truth is in it. No, I don't. That's not what it is. But I have come to believe that there are so many things you have to balance, and what you're saying is true. I also think there's some truth in that right now. There's a risk that any criticism of foreign policy or Israel, and I'm not accusing any individuals of this. I just see that, like you talked about identity politics, accusations of anti-Semitism have become, in some places, a shield against what can be legitimate dialogue, debate, or criticism. And this is happening on the right, So while you point out identity politics on the left, I think we're going to have to strike some kind of balance or get to some honesty here on acknowledging these things that are happening and also having open dialogue that doesn't descend into accusations of anti-Semitism.
Well, absolutely. So I can give you a good example of this. So Thomas Massie is the most libertarian member of Congress. I consider him a personal friend, and he's been on my show many times. He wants to cut foreign aid to absolutely everybody, Israel included. In no way would I consider that anti-Semitic. He has laid out a very specific position that he holds as it pertains to foreign policy and how
real
the
quick,
American
Dave,
budget.
just real quick.
Yeah.
While you don't, he has been accused of it. To your point on Massey, Massey has been accused of anti-Semitism.
Of course. Well, first of all, yeah, I mean, the internet is a place where people say whatever they want. But I'm trying to show you an example where me personally can have a difference of opinion with someone. Now, look, if you told me right now, we're cutting the American foreign budget, foreign aid, 25% across the board. We're not singling out anybody, but we're cutting, we have enough problems here. We're cutting it 25%. I would be fine with that. By the way, every dollar, I know you know this, but every dollar that we quote unquote give to Israel, we don't give to Israel. It has to be spent in America, which is a very perverse system. We actually, and Obama did this. He was the one that changed the way our foreign aid to Israel went out. They have to spend it in America. So it's really a subsidy to the military-industrial complex in America. So now America has a vested interest in keeping Israel at war. That is a huge problem. It's a bigger problem for Israel than it is for America. It's not like we're just sending them cash like we gave to Iran, right? We gave them $6 billion of cash. Remember, it's fungible. They can do whatever they want. With Israel, we quote-unquote give them the money and then we spend it in America so it helps our industries here. Now, you could be to me, that's bad for Israel and it's bad for America because we're just funding too much war. And then, by the way, we help fund the Palestinian Authority that literally pays people to kill Jews. So there's very few clean hands in this thing. But my broader point on Massey was that, of course, you can have a policy disagreement with somebody and understand it's not because they're a racist or an anti-Semite or whatever else. Now, it is the internet and people are always going to say all of those things. But I would say more specifically to some of the people that you've mentioned here, if you're running around out of nowhere, suddenly claiming Israel is, committing genocide or lying about some of the history of the area, intentionally confusing your audience and everything else, when, by the way, because our mainstream media has failed us to the extent that people are turning to anyone online to get something true, then that's where the problem is. I'm happy to lay out any of the history if you want to hear it, but yeah.
Well, do you think beyond Israel, beyond this issue? So when I asked you about the we're just asking questions style of discourse, I actually wasn't even just leading you into a discussion of anti-Semitism or Israel. I wonder, do you think, you talked about misleading your audience. Do you think there is a problem on the right? Like the left wants to censor, right? And there's a good chunk of conservative influencers who are, I think I'm comfortable saying this, who are pretty cynical in putting out things that are at the very least sloppy. And I'm not talking about on the issue that we've been discussing, on any host of it. I saw it with Maui, okay? I saw it with Maui. Like a whole rotten narrative was put out when it came to Maui that was pure BS about blue roofs and laser beams and direct energy weapons. And a lot of it came from the right. And so whether or not we're just asking questions, do you think there's a problem on the right that's actually feeding in to this censorship idea?
Well, there's a problem because of the way business operates. Let's remove any going after anyone's intentions or thinking anyone is a hater of this person or this group or anything else. At a purely business level, there's an issue here. Tucker Carlson is no longer with Fox. He now has his own network. I like Tucker, so this is not a knock on Tucker. He has his own network. Would he love, as a guy that's running a network, to take out the Daily Wire and to take out the place that you work, Fox? Of course the answer is yes. He would love to take all of your audience and monetize it and create a new network that is the number one thing in, let's say, right-leaning or conservative media. So would he be willing perhaps to go down roads that maybe even he wasn't as comfortable with to attain that? I'd have to ask him specifically, but I think the answer is probably. So Ben Shapiro at the Daily Wire is a big fish, and everyone's kind of going for the big fish right now. Fox is a big fish. Everyone's going for the big fish. And there are different reasons that everyone kind of wants to do that. And I don't think they're purely nefarious in terms of hating someone because of their religion. I think some of them are kind of like pretty obvious business decisions.
Well, I'm not comfortable going as far as you just did. First of all, like I know a lot of those individuals that you just named, and I can never know someone's motivations. And I'm not criticizing you, Dave.
But that's why I'm not saying
I don't know.
That
if I don't know someone's motivations, if I don't know someone's motivations, I hate it when people do that to me. You're doing this because of X or Y. You don't know me or why I'm doing something, or what I actually believe. Not you, Dave, the proverbial you, right? Because you've never impugned my motivations. But the left has constantly impugned my motivations, and it's my least favorite thing. But I do think, and again, this is beyond the individuals discussed, incentive structure on the internet is leading certain conversations in directions in pursuit of eyeballs and traffic, okay? But what's interesting about this, Dave, is I think we're actually, and you know so much because of your involvement in Rumbles and local, I think we're starting to see like eyeballs and traffic that don't create true audience with real value is kind of worthless, Dave. Like, it's just like attention seeking.
So what I've been calling that lately is I think there's a certain set of people, and again, I'm not, and I maybe I misspoke or you slightly heard wrong. I'm actually not going after Tucker when I say that. I'm just trying to say, as a business person, if you were creating a competitive product, you would go for the number one guy, right? Like if somebody's selling the number one toilet tissue, then another guy comes out, you're going to try to get his market share. That's just how it is. But I would say, in relation to what you're talking about now, what you're really talking about is that the internet, because it has so opened up everything, there's always a fringe, and then there's a fringe of a fringe, and a fringe of a fringe, and a fringe of a fringe of a fringe, and there's always an audience there. So you're going to have people constantly chasing all of these things. We also live in a time where the actual truth, because mainstream media has been so derelict in its duty, has been so blown apart, and we agree on so little that people are looking for anything that roughly sounds right wherever they can find it. So then I think what has happened now is there's a series of people, and I'm truly, truly not going after anyone specifically here, but there is a portion of people who basically are what I call energy chasers. And if they see some weird shiny thing in the corner of the internet, and that will get clicks, which generate revenue and everything else, they will go there. And then they can actually shift the entire conversation into something that has very little to do with exactly where you started, which is the problems of most people and how most people want to live in this country. And that's why I'm really trying not to be part of that. And even when I had Ben on right after the Candace thing, if you watch the whole interview, I went out of my way not to attack her. I think we've talked about Tucker here. I'm not attacking Tucker. I'm just, and I'm trying to do that. And maybe I'm failing at it. Maybe there's no way to be part of any of this and then not be part of the meta problem. But I think it's worth a shot.
I appreciate your sentiment. You said you want to be a bridge builder. And I appreciate your sentiment. I think you've characterized it well. It's like an energy chaser. And I just, again, I don't like interpersonal. It's not that I don't like interpersonal conflict. I'm happy to look someone face to face and debate hard. I don't like the soap opera part of all of this stuff. But I do think underneath the soap opera, there is something going on. And a lot of it, if we're being honest, is happening on the right. Like the energy chasing you're talking about, that thing, it's happening on the right.
Will, the best resolution for what we're talking about specifically here is that Tucker and Ben sit down. I know Ben has agreed to do it. I know they've texted about it privately. Ben said that on my show. And because it is Tucker that, in my estimation, has misrepresented Ben's opinions, I've never heard Ben represent Tucker's opinions, it's incumbent on Tucker to have that sit down. There is no reason that Tucker Carlson and Ben Shapiro shouldn't have a sit down, hash this out, and then Dave Rubin and Will Cain will figure out something else to talk about in a couple weeks. And that would be the best resolution.
I haven't talked about it up until now. Yeah, the only reason, again, I've said it for the third time. The only reason I am talking about it is because I want to explore deeper things, and I think there is something deeper on the right.
I'm with you.
We're kind of toying into this idea of, I think in some ways we're allowing the whole censorship regime to point and go, see. And when I say we, I mean, that's the loose collection of right that represents, as you pointed out twice now, so importantly, on the internet, which is the internet is like, you get everything you want to find on the internet. And that's the way we both believe it should be, by the way. Neither of us would believe in censorship. Okay, you got to go in just a moment. So I want to ask you one quick story or quick topic that's totally divorced from what we're talking about, because I think you'd be interesting on this. Billy Dee Williams was on Bill Maher's podcast, and he said that he thought there's nothing wrong with actors doing blackface. He pointed to Laurence Olivier doing Othello. He thought it was funny, and Bill Maher was kind of blown away, like, well, you'd be destroyed today. And of course, Bill Maher is accurately diagnosing reality, but the question is, should it be reality, or is Billy Dee Williams right? Like, the nature of acting is acting. So if you want to, playing another race is part of acting.
First, Will, I got to tell you, when I lived in LA, one of the best things that ever happened to me was going to a jazz club vibrato and seeing Billy Dee Williams at the table next to me and walking up to him and saying, thank you, Lando, for everything you did for the galaxy. And I bought him a drink. That is one of my great joys in life. That's number one. He didn't even take the drink, but I offered to buy him a drink. Look, this is going to get me in trouble, I'm sure, too. But of course, he's right. The thing about acting is, do you know this, Will? They're not actually doing the thing. Tom Hanks actually never went to space. He was never stuck on that island. They are pretending to do these things. Most of these actors really can't do much of anything. And you might pretend, Robert Downey Jr. pretending to be a black guy in Tropic Thunder, which somehow he's escaped the horrors of. There are plenty of people who do blackface, like Jimmy Kimmel or Sarah Silverman, who dated for a while, who do it with actually more of like an honestly racist undertone to it. But a gay person should be allowed to play a straight person. A straight person should be allowed to play a gay person. I don't know that you really need white people playing black people. But once we start putting these artificial constructs on art, which is what movie making and television stories are supposed to be, once you start doing that, you degrade the very definition of what art is. And might I hypothesize, Will, that's why we don't have that much great art right now. When was the last time you heard a great new song? It's not like it used to be. When was the last time you watched a great new movie, a great new TV show? Yeah, a couple things trickle through every now and again. But I have a good friend who was a multiple-time Emmy award-winning, I don't want to say actor or actress in Hollywood, but one or the other. And he or she told me that basically you cannot do anything anymore, because the second you get in that writer's room, instead of them talking about what's the best story, what are the most original characters, et cetera, it's, we have to have a trans writer and a black writer. We have to talk about our feelings for 3 hours and everything else that you laid out in your monologue there. It takes away from the intention of whatever, or the purpose of whatever the company is or the art is or anything else. And we will be left with not much of anything, and we'll all just have to watch the same stuff we watched in 1985, which for me isn't that terrible, but you know.
So the left worries about the destruction of democracy at the hands of a totalitarian, a single man. When we live in a world where we're seeing the destruction of art and everything else, including truth and justice, destroyed by committee, destroyed by representation in the room at a table where everyone has plausible deniability on the evil they create because, hey, it was decided upon by a committee. Always great. Rubin Report, locals.com, Rubin Report on X. Hey, thanks for making the time, Dave, and always enjoy the conversation.
Anytime, Will.
All right, here's Dave Rubin of the Rubin Report. By the way, would Sean Penn get to play, what was the name of the movie? He played a mentally disabled guy. Would I Am Sam, would he get to do that role today? Would Tom Hanks get to do Forrest Gump? You know, I don't know that the answer is yes. I don't think Robert Downey Jr. would get to do the character he did in Tropic Thunder. I think that wouldn't get made, for sure. And we can acknowledge it in the past. Yes, when Hollywood cast Italians as American Indians, yeah, maybe you were just looking for the darkest skinned actor you could find to play off an American Indian, and it wasn't all right and good. It was bad. But we, as a pendulum always swings, we overcorrect in the other direction where you can only play something that shares your exact DNA background. Like, in other words, you can't pretend. In other words, you can't act. All right, coming up, is UConn now a blue blood? Where's the line? How many programs are in the club? And Morgan Wallen has been arrested. Will he go to jail? That's next on The Will Cain Show.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network, the Fox News Rundown, a contrast of perspectives you won't hear anywhere else. Your daily dose of news twice a day, going far beyond the headlines, tapping into the massive reporting resources of Fox News to provide a full picture of the news of the day.
I'm Dana Perino.
I'm Brett Baer.
I'm Maria Bartiromo.
I'm Brian Kilmeade, and this is the Fox News Rundown.
Subscribe and listen now by going to foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
It was the Hollywood murder trial that captivated America. Now, the Menendez brothers are back in the spotlight, and Fox Nation is bringing you a shocking docuseries with new evidence and new perspective on the case.
There are real people at the heart of this story.
Were abuse allegations overlooked?
They couldn't imagine a father abusing his sons.
Was their fate already sealed?
I said, oh my God, this is rigged.
And is there a case now to set the Menendez brothers free? The Menendez brothers, victims or villains, streaming now on Fox Nation.
Starting April 15th, the Fox News Podcast Network launches a new fast-paced daily quiz.
5 questions, 5 minutes a day, 5 days a week. Who was the first person to walk on the moon?
Jackson or something?
Neil Armstrong.
Who sings the song Antihero?
Taylor Swift?
Taylor Swift.
No. So that you know. Okay.
Take the quiz every weekday at thequiz.fox.
Play, share, and of course listen to The Quiz at thequiz.fox.
Morgan Wallen throws a chair off a 6-store balcony rooftop in Nashville, Tennessee, and he's been arrested on felony charges. Will we see him in jail? Morgan Wallen, coming up in just a moment here on the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, the Fox News YouTube channel, and the Fox News Facebook page. We do not have Morgan Wallen coming up. I just realized the way I said that. It sounds like in just a moment I'll be bringing in the biggest star, or the second biggest star in country music. I follow an Instagram account called Country Central, and they did a March Madness-style bracket. Morgan Wallen and Zach Bryan were in the final. Zach Bryan won the country music March Madness bracket. Wallen was runner-up. Not unlike Purdue, who lost last night to UConn. UConn with their second back-to-back national championship. And that brings us to our brackets here on the Will Cain Show. Let's bring in Tinfoil Pat, Two-A-Days Dan, and Young Establishment James for a quick update on our bracket. Now that the tournament has finished,
I'd rather not.
Who got first, who got last?
Well, there's a pretty big discrepancy between first and last, I'll tell you that, just to start off. So we got last, we got Tinfoil Pat. Sorry, bud, you got 0 points in the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, the Final Four, and the national championship game. That's very impressive. And more impressive than...
So he was eliminated by the Sweet 16? He was basically, all his teams were gone by the Sweet 16?
0 points. I don't mean like a few close to 0. I mean actually 0 is the number.
It takes a lot of guts not to go straight chalk.
I mean, I'm real proud of you. You know, it's a real feat.
So,
there.
Pat, is this like your whole philosophy of conspiracies? Like, it takes a lot of guts to end up wrong?
I'm right on a lot on those. So you got to take some, and you lose some and win some.
We'll try something else with you, another sport. It's fine.
Dan,
I'll do better in fantasy football than
Yeah, Dan, what was Tinfoil Pat in the nation? What percentage did he end up in the nation?
7.6% in the nation.
So he's in the bottom 7% of Americans that picked brackets.
Yeah, he didn't get over the top 10%.
I've gotten beaten by a lot.
I've been doing this for a long time, brackets and stuff like that. That's the lowest I've seen, but it's okay. We won't kill you anymore.
All right,
My bad.
Where's it go from Pat?
Will Cain it came in third place. You had some points. You were in the 48th percentile, 48%.
Okay, below average.
Yeah, because you had Auburn winning. That really killed you. You had some.
So it turns out that Don Lemon and Roland Martin and others who have called me a mediocre white guy are wrong. I'm a below average white guy.
That's true. You would not have passed in school with this grade, but that's fine.
Right.
They changed the rulings now, so I think like a D is actually over 45%.
That's soft. That's soft.
Yeah.
Not for Will.
All right, so coming in second.
Any of us.
Coming in second is myself. I had 1,120 points. I had 84.6% is where I landed. I did okay. I had UConn
big
winning.
Jump from my 48.
It's true.
Yeah.
There was a big discrepancy in the bottom two and the top two. But I had UConn winning, so that counted. But there's still just no competing with Establishment James. He had 99.1%. He had Purdue and UConn going to the championship game.
Bam on the Final Four.
He killed it this year.
Wow. 99.1%. The virtue of being establishment. Going chalk. Turns out the elite always win. Congratulations, young Establishment James. Speaking of elites, always winning. Let's talk about Morgan Wallen, who was arrested in Nashville, Tennessee. Morgan Wallen was told that an ex-girlfriend of his is getting married to someone else. He responded to that allegedly by taking a chair and throwing it off the 6th floor rooftop of Eric Church's bar in Nashville, Tennessee. The chair flies to the ground 6 stories down and almost hits police officers. They arrest Wallen. There are pictures of him down on the street on Broadway talking to police officers in white jeans. That's deserving of its own segment. And he is arrested on charges that include felony. He could be charged with felony reckless endangerment that could accompany up to 6 years in prison, 1 to 6 years in prison. Now, the question is, will Morgan Wallen go to prison? And I think that we all know the answer is no. He won't go to prison. And we can say it's because he's a celebrity. We can say it's because he's a star. We can say it's because he's rich. But the answer to why Morgan Wallen won't go to prison is because of me. It's because of you. It's because of us. It's because he's Morgan Wallen. You know, we often talk about why the rich or the famous aren't subject to the same justice system that everyone else is. And by the way, what Wallen did is incredibly dangerous. I mean, if that chair from 6 stories up lands on a person, you're talking about serious injury to death. But it didn't. And I'm fairly certain we will not see the book thrown at Morgan Wallen. Unsurprising, right? But why? Unsurprising. Rich, celebrities, famous, don't sit and live in the same justice system as everyone else. So why? Well, the answer I do think is you and me. You know, think about the way this is going to be calculated in Nashville, Tennessee. And I don't know for certain. I didn't look it up before the show. But my assumption is the district attorney in that county is popularly elected. It's a Democratic election. Morgan Wallen, I just said to you, is like perhaps the biggest country music star in the country. He means big business in Nashville. But more than that, he's incredibly popular. If you're running for office, does that help you or hurt you get elected to throw the book at Morgan Wallen? I think we all know the answer. The Nashville Police Department, while not publicly elected, reports to a mayor who is democratically elected. And do they want that kind of negative attention and, you know, unpopularity? And the answer is no. And so not unlike politics is a game of popularity, every step of every calculation, this isn't a celebration or a condemnation. It's just a simple diagnosis of reality is, who does that serve? Throwing the book at Morgan Wallen. And the answer is not the police, not the DA, not the mayor, not the justice system, not you, not me, because we wouldn't want it. You might be in the comments saying that you want equal justice, you want a system. But the truth is, Morgan Wallen's record sales are up today. This is who we are. We don't want him to be treated like the other guy that throws this off the balcony. We don't want the book thrown at Morgan Wallen. And that's just not right, not wrong. That's just the way it is in the world. Speaking of elites, UConn now, I think, safely in the group of blue bloods in NCAA college basketball. UConn won its 6th national championship, putting it on par with North Carolina, tied for 3rd behind UCLA with 11 and Kentucky with 8. And UConn, I think you'd say, is the youngest member of the Blue Blood Club. All 6 of those national championships coming since 1999, under 3 different coaches, Danny Hurley, Kevin Ollie, and Jim Calhoun. Completely different styles of rosters, and different than others. You know, Kansas isn't, you know, some private school in the Northeast, but different than others. Like the traditional concept of Blue Bloods is kind of defined by schools like Duke, who, by the way, UConn just surpassed at 5th. Duke, obviously, also a blue blood. So different than others. UConn is in the, I mean, I know those of us in the rest of the country think of Connecticut, the entirety of it is snooty. UConn, it doesn't even have some huge metropolis. Hartford, New Haven, Greenwich. These aren't like huge metropolises. And UConn, not seen as like an Ivy League type school, a public institution playing in the Big East, was full of Northeast private schools. But here they are now, unassailably, I think, the newest member of the blue blood class. And the question then is, where does it cut off? UCLA in, but hasn't won a national championship since 1995, and before that, 1975. Almost a dormant blue blood. Kentucky in, last national championship in 2012, they have 8. North Carolina in with 6. UConn in with 6. Duke in with 5. By the way, all 5 are there since 1991. So here's the real question. Is Indiana, at the risk of upsetting Dan Dockich, is Indiana still a blue blood? Hasn't won a national championship since 1987. Also has 5, tied with Duke. I think we all believe Kansas is. Kansas has 4, but they've spread that 4 out from 52 to 88 to 08 to 2022. What about Villanova? Is that the cut line? But is it above or below Villanova? 3 national championships, 85, 16, and 18. I think it safely goes 5 deep. UCLA, Kentucky, North Carolina, UConn, Duke. I think you have to put in Kansas at 6. I think you begin to have a debate with Indiana, but history probably wins out with 5. And then the real debate begins with Villanova. How many schools are blue blood? You can let us know at Will Cain Show or at Will Cain on X or on Facebook or in the YouTube comments. Wherever you get the Will Cain Show. Will Cain Show at fox.com by email. Love including you in the program, so make sure you contribute to the comments. Share this show with your friends. And I will see you again, provided you subscribe, next time on The Will Cain Show.